Hello and welcome to episode number 4 of the Electronic Music Makers video podcast. I'm Amy Lee.
And I'm Chris Huelsbeck, and we have a guest today, McKay Garner, who is one half of the duo Doppio, and he's showing us his awesome setup here today.
Yeah, so welcome.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so Doppio, why don't you talk a little bit about the band? So it's you and your bandmate Adam.
Adam Tenenbaum.
Yeah.
He plays guitar with an approach that's similar to a sound designer, synth player, controllerist, DJ kind of person. So he can do a lot of things with a guitar that seem like should be done by several people, I think. So we both have an odd approach to music, using different kinds of technology and controllers and traditional techniques of playing to make sounds happen in ways that maybe weren't possible with the original instrument.
Yeah.
So.
And here you have one part of your drum kit, your drumKAT.
A little bit, right?
But you actually call this your drumBot.
Part of the drumBot, yes.
Yeah.
It's a kind of an evolution over a decade, longer than that, of piecing things together. I play an acoustic electronic hybrid drum kit. This is part of the electronic components of that kit. Some of these are DIY little drum pods that I built. With traditional electronic drum kits, a lot of times the pads are about this big, which is great if you're playing drum techniques and you're trying to hit something that you need to find a target to hit that's big enough. But if you're just turning something on and off, like an effect or a loop or something like that, you don't really need, if you've got 10 different things going and you've just got these big buttons everywhere, it takes up a lot of space. So I built these little drum pods to turn drum loops and effects and things on and off really easily, so I can have a cluster of them really close by without too much hauling around.
So how did you build these? I mean, what are the components that go into this?
These are actually inside each one of these. Let me go from the outside in so you can kind of see what's... these are actually PVC pipe covers that are made of rubber. You can get these at Home Depot or Lowe's or your local hardware store, even better. Inside this piece, there's actually a plastic PVC cap. PVC pipe is something used for plumbing usually, and these are the caps that cap those things off. I just needed something that was round and cylindrical that I could swing at. And inside those are the electronics, which are piezo triggers that are made. You can buy them at Radio Shack for a couple bucks. Basically, they're made of little crystal elements that you hit, and it sends out an electronic pulse. They're also called contact microphones, and depending on how they're used. So you hit that, it sends out a pulse. That goes into your drum brain. In this case, it's a drumKAT. And that pulse is turned into a bit of MIDI information, which is basically taking something like a sound and turning it into some kind of information like start this or play this note, something like that. So that's kind of the structure of these, and I've built them with connectors on the end so that they can plug into a drum module of some sort.
That's very cool.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, and then you have some pedals as well that you're using.
Yes, I use on the drumBot kit. There's actually a acoustic element, so I have a standard hi-hat pedal and a bass drum pedal, and I have a video that will probably shows some of that up close. But these pedals are the electronic component. I use this one for sustain, so if you're a keyboard player, a synth player, you're used to having a sustain pedal. I do a lot of keyboard type approaches to music on this guy. So sustain pedal, I have a CV pedal that I use either for pitch bend, or sometimes I may use it to modulate things like delay times, or it may be an A/B slider like a DJ would use. So I can be playing an acoustic sounding drum kit and slowly fade it into something like a drum machine, like an 808 or something, and back and forth.
Exactly.
And this guy's a trigger too.
Why don't we take a look at that video now?
Okay, sounds good.
Great.
Play the clip.
So I took some time and created an Ableton Live set with a bunch of custom configured Ableton Live MIDI plugins that allow me to do all these functions and see them visually right here on the screen. Now what I've done is each one of these different channels I've associated with a specific drum pad on my drum kit. I've put a MIDI clip in here that's going to start out being blank, but I can easily draw in using the draw tool or by double clicking on one of these notes. I can draw in what notes I want this MIDI clip to play when I hit play on the MIDI clip. So I can draw in chords. I could also, let me undo that. I could draw in different motifs, etc. And when I trigger that clip, it's going to play through those things. Okay. I actually usually like to play these motifs mostly on my own because it leaves a lot of room for variation. And I likes me some variation. So, what I've done here is I've taken these different channels and I've created MIDI clips on each of them, some with chords, some with single notes that I'm going to turn into motifs and melodies, and some of these channels over here actually have audio clips on them. Now the first thing that we need to do is, right now I can trigger these with my mouse, but I want to trigger them with drum pads. So I'm going to enable MIDI mapping in Ableton Live by clicking this MIDI button right here. Okay. So after I'm in MIDI mapping mode, and I click on one of these MIDI clips I've created, I can hit a pad. If you notice on the bottom right of your screen, I have a camera on my drumKAT here. I'm going to hit this pad, and you can see it created a MIDI channel, MIDI note assignment there. So now when I turn MIDI mapping off, and I click on pad number 6, or I hit it, it's actually going to trigger that MIDI clip. So now I have this MIDI clip assigned to that pad. Same thing for pad number 1, which I have an E minor chord playing really shortly right now. When I hit it, it's a really short burst of an E minor chord. If I hold down my left foot on the sustain pedal like a keyboard player would do, I can determine how long that note is, or that chord. Okay, so each one of these channels, I have set up a series of MIDI plugins that come with Ableton Live. If we look over here, click on the Live plugins menu, I'll see MIDI effects, and I have a lot of different options here to drag over to these tracks. On pad number 1 that's playing a chord, I have a MIDI pitch plugin, which allows me to easily change what octave that chord's going to play in. I can transpose it from an E minor chord up to a G minor chord, etc., just by changing increments of the pitch plugin. Then I have a note length plugin, which allows me to determine how long that chord is going to play. Right now it's playing a burst of 42 milliseconds. If I bring that up, just by hitting the pad, it's going to play that longer. Super powerful thing to do. I also use pitch bend, a pitch bend pedal on my hybrid kit, so that as I'm playing a chord, I can transpose and I can slowly bend into those different things as I'm playing live. So it gives me a lot of power to create different harmonic colors. I can do the same thing when I'm playing the single notes and have these kind of blippy pitch bend kind of events going on that it's really fun to play and create on the spot. But I also have set up the ability to turn drum loops and bass lines on and off. In this case, I have a fully programmed drum part that I have assigned to this particular clip right here. So I'll go back into MIDI mapping mode, click on the clip that I want to trigger, and I'm going to hit a pad up here. You can see it assign that MIDI note to that clip. Got a couple of different launch modes. Toggle means I hit it once, it's going to turn on. I hit it again, it's going to turn off. You can find a lot of information about these on YouTube or the Ableton site about how these different clips work. But in this case, when I hit this pad, going to trigger the drum pattern. Turn it off. Then I've got my loose. Etc. So you've got lots of things to play with. It gives you a lot of power to be able to play acoustic drums and trigger different melodies and pads, melodies and chords as you're playing. You can turn different things on and off. I also use these different MIDI clips to trigger effects events. So I may want to have things like LFOs or delays, etc., being modulated when I turn on one of these clips. So it gives you a lot of power to do a lot of things. One more thing you can do with this is actually set it up to your lighting system. So as you're playing a show, you could be using drum pads to trigger specific lighting scenes or individual lights. So you can literally trigger your light show while you're playing. It's just endless possibilities of using MIDI with Ableton Live and electronic drums. I hope this tutorial inspires you to do something really creative of your own. This is McKay Garner. Enjoy.
So welcome back. Wow, that was awesome.
Thank you.
So tell me more about the setup and how these pads are triggering the sounds and stuff.
Okay. This could actually be configured on a standard electronic kit that has a bunch of big drum pads on the kit. Each one of those pads I've set up to send a single MIDI note, like hitting a key on a keyboard. And I've configured Ableton Live here to do different things depending on how I set up each channel. So on the computer here, each channel of Ableton Live is dedicated to a pad, which means I could have a completely different synth or sampler for every single pad that I'm playing. I can also determine what each pad does, such as stepping through different melodies. As I hit each pad, it can change notes. It could play a chord. And since I'm using my left foot for sustain, I can hold down chords. I can pitch bend those chords. I've got a kit here that's set up for standard drumming, but using kind of glitch kind of sounds. If you look on the screen here, you can see when I hit this pad, it's stepping through a little grid. I'm using some Ableton Live MIDI plugins that come with Live. And as I hit the pad, it's stepping through different samples.
That's so cool.
Dropped into the
I really like
impulse
that, yeah.
sampler here. So if you watch the drum machine, it's stepping through those as I play. So you've got kick drum here. I've got some melodic things, single notes, bass notes, pitch bend with my foot.
Oh, wow.
So different samples. I can start loops on and off. Something like that. Bass drops, etc. So you can kind of control the entire universe from one chair. It's really super exciting and fun.
Wow, that's so awesome.
There's a lot of things you can do to configure your kit so that part of it, sometimes I'm playing acoustic drums and I want to be able to play chords or trigger rhythmic things or sometimes melodic things. So you can play a standard drum kit and just by hitting different pads and using switching feet, there's a lot of tap dancing going on in our show between different pedals. Adam has like 4 different pedals controlling different things for his guitar. So there's a lot of moving around going on, but it gives you a lot of power to be able to play a lot more instruments as one person. Since there are only 2 of us, we kind of have to juggle a lot. So it's crazy fun to do.
So you guys just released your first self-titled album,
Yes.
Doppio, right?
Yes.
Now, on that one, you said that you kind of multi-tracked a little, right?
It depends on the song. Some of them a lot. You know, there's definitely a layering going on because there's 2 of us, and we can handle a lot at one time. But the object of this record was to rent out a recording studio for an entire month, go in all day, every day, without any kind of plan, and just make up things off the top of our head. So
the entire album was actually improv, right?
Yes and no. It all came out of improv. Some of it's straight improv. Some of it, there were a couple of tunes, a song called Lowballer and Return, that Lowballer was worked out in the studio. It came out of improv, a bunch of drum patterns, and then Adam came in and played some guitar lines that we got excited about, so we started chopping things and actually made an arrangement for that one.
Yeah.
But several of the pieces were actually just playing for like 20 minutes with whatever sounds we thought we wanted to pull up, and then going back and going, okay, this isn't going to be 20 minutes. How do we cut this back? Sometimes it would just be a guitar sound and a drum sound. Sometimes I'm playing bass and triggering programmed drums, and then we'd go back and do guitar over that. It depends on what we were in the mood to play. So if the tune wasn't full enough, we'd go back and go, this needs bass, or this should have real drums or something.
Yeah.
But it all came from that original, like, let's just throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks kind of thing. So
Well, it's very catchy, the entire album, and every single track kind of has its own personality.
Right
like,
on.
I mean, so this dubstep thing that you just kind of played with a little more like kind of grinding like tones, that's not on the album.
right.
But I mean, you have a lot more material that you've recorded, right?
Yes, we came out of the studio with about 50 workable fragments or pieces of music. We had to figure out which ones we wanted to continue working on, so we narrowed it down to 8. And some of them literally were 15, 20 minutes long, and you've got to figure out what's not precious. We used a lot of, I would say, non-traditional techniques of recording,
Like,
particularly using a lot of electronic music may be recorded specifically on the computer with a lot of direct sounds, soft synths, or synthesizers directly into an interface or straight to tape or whatever you use. We wanted to capture a lot of the bleed between drum mics, the guitars bleeding into the drum mics. I'm using PA speakers in the room for the recordings, so there'd be moments of a 20-minute piece of music where you go, oh, dude, this guitar section is so sick, but the drum part isn't as cool as this other section, and we can't really edit that because they're bleeding into each other's mics. So you're throwing stuff out based on who's bleeding into what, because literally these are pieces of music that we're creating off the top of our head, so we haven't figured out, melodies are developing, like, oh, this would be cool, and about the 4th minute in, you're like, oh, yeah, okay, there it is,
Awesome.
Same thing with drum parts. I'm trying to play things and use these pedals in ways I've never used them. There's no rehearsal, so you're screwing up a lot, going, well, let's play this, basically just blabbering like I'm doing now, and then you go back and cut it and go, oh, this part's cool. So
Yeah, sounds like a monster editing job.
it was pretty monster editing on some songs, and then some songs were just quickly, like the track Cobra that was used in the music video race was not meant to really be an actual recording on any record. We used to have a very small recording rehearsal studio, which was the usual rehearsal studio with carpet on the walls. Sounded really awful. It was about this big. Adam and I were like playing to like this, really tight because it was small. We were about to leave the rehearsal room. I had a little Octava 012 small diaphragm condenser mic over my shoulder that I just threw into I think it was an inbox or something, a Pro Tools interface, to just get an idea down. Adam had a guitar head, and we just threw a line out of that thing into another channel. So we had 2 channels for that tune. Said, okay, let's just throw something down before we leave, and maybe it'll be something we can develop later. We recorded this sloppy, gnarly, dirty improv, total improv. Sounded unbelievably awful. The recording was just horrible. But we went back after this studio recording, and we're listening to old stuff, and we're like, dude, this is so crazy and mean, that we just used a lot of studio tricks with taking the drum recording, which was mono, and triggering kick, snare, and I don't even think we triggered any toms, but kick and snare to beef it up. Did a lot of crazy EQ and widening tricks, delay, etc. to the drums. Reamp the guitars into real amps or fake amps, depending on section, and then we added like a kind of dubstep kind of bass, and one of us went Cobra into a mic.
That's so awesome.
And it turned out to this gnarly, dirty thing. It was just tricky because the things that we recorded on the record, we used a lot of really great gear, top end everything to record the record, which is funny because it's a really dirty, lo-fi, 8-bit, gritty record, and I'm used to making records that are supposedly sound really, pristine, and we wanted something dirty, so we're using all this great gear and then destroying it later with the sound.
Right.
But Cobra was a song that was tricky to get, even sonically, try to get it up to the other stuff because there just wasn't anything to work with. It's literally like a camera phone through your shirt, kind of resolution, trying to make that fit into a portfolio. So anyway.
But it's one of the best songs, in my opinion, on the album.
Thank
you. You mentioned the music video race, and so why don't you talk a little bit about that? So you and a film team, which you had never met before,
Right.
in 48 hours, produced a music video?
Right. There was this is a brilliant idea by a guy named Tim and a woman named Jacqueline that came up with this idea originally to have 20 bands, 20 filmmakers that had never met each other, to be thrown together on a Friday night in a room, randomly paired up, and they have 48 hours to make a music video, including concept, actors, location, crew, gear, all that stuff had to be put together, that day, shot the next day, and hopefully edited the next day and delivered by Sunday. So it ended up, I can't remember how many bands, maybe 14, something like that. And then at the end, a couple weeks later, they have a big screening party at the rickshaw stop in San Francisco, and they show all the videos and they announce different winners for different categories and crazy fun.
Doppio did fairly well at that particular event.
Yeah,
Yes.
really excited about that.
Yeah, so that's great. Well, why don't we show a little bit of the video, and we'll cut to that right now.
Do it.
So and we're back, and you have some more demos or songs to play? Or?
Sure. This is part of a song called Return on the Doppio record. I'm using, got some pads assigned to chords. I'm able to use my right foot for pitch bend, left foot for sustain. So it's short notes. As long as I hold my foot down, I'll get sustain. These guys are stepping through. If you look at the screen here, I've got these grids set up so that every time I hit a pad, it's playing a predefined note. So I can play these different combinations of melodies. Can use the pitch bend. The chorus of Return goes something like this. Now I use these little pods to trigger different drum and bass patterns. So the beginning of the song is something like right foot triggering a low E. Now I've got a chord up here. Something like that.
Very cool.
It's really, really entertaining to try to remember which note you left off on because it's stepping through. So you get a little bit of randomization of the intervals that since you've got an 8-note sequence, it may have stopped last time on note number 3, which may be a G, and this guy stopped on an F sharp, and you don't remember that until you hit it, and you've got to react to that dissonance or consonance based on where you left it off. So there's always this reaction thing going on it's very stimulating.
And obviously you're a drummer too, so you play like acoustic drum sets and you have learned that for a long time, and that's why you have the dexterity and everything to do that. Right. Cool.
But you also play keyboards and bass and what else?
Started out on drums. I got around more on the keyboard for compositional purposes. Play a little bit of guitar enough to get things out and a few measures at a time. And same thing with bass, some vocal stuff as well. So depending on the project, I use those things to get the job done, and it just may be more slowly than somebody that's on the guitar or something.
Yeah.
So.
But this doppio is like your fun project where you experiment and you do all this stuff, but you also do music and production and all that stuff as a job, right? So
yes, I've done that a long time. I moved here a few years ago to San Francisco from Los Angeles. So I ran a commercial studio there for years. So I was recording any kind of music, bands, solo artists. Got hired a lot as a producer, so a lot of times it would be a band or a singer-songwriter would come in and they needed someone that could play enough of different instruments, or I arranged strings and horns and synth design, all that kind of stuff. So I got my feet wet doing a lot of things from miking, programming, fixing, stopping arguments, trying to be inspiring to get the best performances out of people, and that has kind of filtered into experimenting musically and adventuring and having adventures out in the world on my own. So musically, so.
And here's another song.
Okay, this is actually just an excerpt from the song Molasses. When we do this live, we extend the song a little bit and we do some improv. Each one of these pads I have set to individual notes, so I'm playing the bass line on that tune for most of the tune, actually all the tune. Some glitchy R2-D2 crashed into a neighborhood sounds over here. I can actually create bass lines and pieces using these two guys here. Left foot on sustain, right foot on pitch bend. something like that. So
So cool.
crazy
I
fun.
love it. So actually, this is something that brings me to your work in life, that you're programming these different triggers and stuff like that, or you make them work within life.
Yes.
And that's all what you're putting together there. And how are you coming up with the samples and the sounds?
Okay. It depends on the tune. Obviously, we pick sounds. Since the album was a lot of improv, it was more like either one of us would pick a sound that we liked and the other one would react to it and pick sounds that we liked against that. Or there were a few days where one of us would go into the studio individually and just go with our own ideas, and the next person would come in the next day. One of us would go home and they'd just blab all over that with their sounds, etc., and ideas. With Ableton Live, I use a combination of samplers and synths. Sometimes I have the doppio sound. A lot of it's kind of gritty and dirty, and we use a lot of distortions, lo-fi, 8-bit kind of things, lots of filters, but still try to keep it sounding really live with lots of microphones, room mics, and all those kind of things. From the sound design standpoint, we tend to do a lot of layering. So depending on the tune, I may have several synths being triggered at once. Like in Ableton Live, you can have these different racks. So I may have something for the low end filtered a certain way. I may have something kind of dirty in the mid-range and something kind of glassy on the top, etc. I may have LFOs or different kind of things modulating differently for each layer, something like that. Sometimes I like to modulate those things with my feet, obviously, like a keyboard player, a guitar player with a whammy bar or whatever. Since my hands are kind of busy beating on pads and drums and things, I use my feet to change those kind of speeds, pitch bend, delay times, all those kind of things. So from a sound design standpoint, we can basically react to things and try to achieve something that's in your head. And as you know, I know you're a sound designer as well, you're always shooting based on vertical, like frequency things, width or modulation or depth, reverbs, and those kind of things. So we tend to modulate those things so they're breathing one way or the other and layering on top, from top to bottom. Does that
Totally.
answer the question?
It's awesome.
Okay, right on.
So thank you very much. This is amazing. You know,
Thank you.
the whole tour of like how you built this and the integration with Ableton and how you're working with Adam to kind of like bring this like massive sound together with only just like 2 people. So thank you for your time, and we'll put up the website to the band, doppiotheband.com.
Great, thank you.
And we'll be looking forward to your performances.
Cool, thank you. I hope to
Great.
see you guys there and jumping around off of things and
Absolutely.
setting things on fire. No, that's not good.
No, don't set things on fire.
No, not good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Love it.